Welcome to IMAX's Behind the Frame. I have the immense honor of sitting with one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, Mr. George Miller.
That's kind of you. Thank you.
No, I'm
Yeah.
so excited to get to chat with you about Furiosa. We were kind of talking off camera about it, but could you talk about experiencing the bits of Furiosa that you've seen in IMAX and how that felt?
You know, it's a big thing to see the film in a place that shows it in the way we intended. When we shoot, it's for the big screen. When we do the color correction, it's for the big screen. When we do the sound, it's for the big screen. And so it's the kind of peak experience of watching it watching it with other people on the big screen. You know that eventually some people are going to watch it on iPhones, some are going to watch it on laptops, sometimes in smaller theaters, mostly at home, and so on. But as I say, that you're looking for that peak experience. I think there is something about the cinema experience that is kind of intrinsic to us. Shared experiences in great theaters is something that we're hardwired for it. And I remember, even when I was a little kid, and people would put laugh tracks on sitcoms. It was purely because there was a kind of almost a longing to reproduce that experience being in a movie theater. And I also remember going to drive-ins where people would sit in drive-ins in their cars, and if they really liked something, they'd flash their headlights on and off, and suddenly the screen would be lit up with these flashing headlights. And that was a way of trying to share that communal experience. I think that's, and thank goodness there's IMAX today that we can see it, because that's what most filmmakers, particularly something like this film, that's why we make films. So it's great that people are really embracing that experience. Yeah,
I agree. I
yeah.
mean, and your film in particular, your body of work, you were a master of the big screen, in my opinion, but I would say in just about, the film community, everybody's
Yeah.
opinion. In my research and just from watching, especially your previous film, Mad Max Fury Road, one thing that I was really fascinated about what you did was alternating frame rates to accentuate the action and shooting day for night. I'm curious, did you replicate some of the stuff you did in Fury Road, or did you try some new things on Furiosa? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, every film is different, and what differentiates films is story. So Fury Road happens over 3 days and 2 nights, compressed time. Everything had to be learned on the run. This happens over 18 years, from when Furiosa's 10 to when she's 28. So it's got different rhythms, and each scene has different requirements. Some of them are pretty intense action scenes, which have a different approach to it, and some are quieter scenes, some have a different intensity to it. So it's basically finding the right, just in music, as you have different tempos and so on. You have adagio or presto, like really fast scenes, and then quiet, the quiet sort of more emotional scenes. That's the case. We use day for night in the same way that Westerns use the day for night. For one very simple reason. Horses have no headlights. If you're shooting with cars, it's hard to shoot day for night with headlights on. In the world of Mad Max, if you're traveling in the desert at night with your motorbike headlights on, or your car headlights on, it's not conducive to your survival. Someone's going to see you from a distance. That's why people don't like light campfires, or if they do, they have to be buried in the ground. So day for night is a natural way to go with these things. In terms of the basic syntax of the action, they're basically the same. It's the rhythms of the stories, or the sequences that are probably different.
I think something that's really cool is Mad Max was your feature directorial debut, right? In terms of feature length film, the first one. And my question is more around the story, kind of going back to your point of how you build the story and then work from there. Where did the story of Furiosa come from? And how did that come about? And what was that process to bring it to life?
There's no way we could have made that film without understanding in great detail not only who Furiosa was, but how everyone else got into that world. So we wrote her story before we shot Fury Road, and we ended up writing that as a script with concept art and illustration, again just to show how that character that we meet in Fury Road came about. And we did the same thing for the Max character. We told a story from the year before we encounter him in Fury Road. So, and that's purely as a way to get everybody on the same page with cohesive strategies as to how to, about everything in the movie, every not only design of the costumes, not only understanding who the characters might be, their weapons, their vehicles, every gesture you see, all of that had to be built into the screenplay. So when Fury Road got traction, we said, okay, well let's do Furiosa. So that's here we are now.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, it's exciting. It's cool to see the process too behind it. The sound design in some of your previous work is just incredible. And could you talk about how you imagine the sound design in this film and how the IMAX of it all plays into it and how it impacts an audience?
You can do much more with sound, and you can be much more meticulous with sound. And sound, I like to say that the audience should see the movie with their ears and hear it with their eyes. There's so much you can tell, or so much you can enhance the experience of the story for the audience through sound. And so to be able to work with really fine sound people on Furiosa was wonderful. And we've worked, and people who are great artists and technicians, and really getting sounds that are very, very appropriate to each moment. It's just not a wall of sound coming at you in a crazy way, just to be loud for its own sake. You're like a great bit of music. You're carried away by the way it's modulated, by its rhythms and so on. It's exactly the same with sound. And I must say, I'm really, really delighted by what's been achieved on this. It just helps you be immersed in the story. To see it in IMAX for me is as I said, peak experience, both sound and picture, particularly when you sit in the seats and they feel the rumble. And then, there's a lot of moments when you actually feel the power and the rumble, and yet you can hear every breath when you need to, every subtle nuance in the moments that are much closer to silence. To get that sort of whole spectrum of sound, all purposeful, not just sort of as an affectation, is really great.
I love that you brought up the rumble of because I mean, especially in that theater, but any IMAX, you feel that so much. I'm can't wait to feel the rumble of the engine of Furiosa in IMAX.
And it's important to the story. There's some moments when that rumble is literally key to the story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is there a particular moment or scene in Furiosa that you think is going to be really impactful in IMAX?
Well, obviously the action scenes. They're the most obvious things, and they're some big action scenes in it. Again, character driven. They're not just for they're not just for themselves. So that's obvious. But there are also scenes which are very very intimate and quiet, and yet I like to think have a lot of power in them. And to bring them off, each in their own way, taking advantage of what the scene offers up, the actual, visceral attack of the sequence during a hardcore action sequence where the world is just completely wild around you and so on, is one thing. And then to have that same thing on the opposite end of the continuum where it's so quiet and subtle, and yet you're still as emerged. I mean, that's the task of telling stories through this wonderful, new language, relatively new language we have in cinema. It's only about 120 years old, 125 years old.
Yeah.
And sound's only been around for, just under a century of that.
Yeah.
And now we've got the technology to be able to just make it, really, I think, powerful experiences. It's just up to the storytellers to use the tools properly.
One question that we've gotten the opportunity to ask some brilliant filmmakers is, if you could experience any film in IMAX, what would you choose and why? It could be again or for the first time, but any film that you admire.
Oh boy. I would, oh God, there's so many movies. I would, it obviously has to be a sound movie. Ben-Hur made in 1959, William Wyler, epic. Like, it felt you were immersed in the world and you lost track of time. That would be an amazing thing, particularly that chariot race, which is one of the classic moments in cinema. That's one of them that comes to mind.
I'm really curious, are there any filmmakers, past or present, that their work inspires you or that influences the way that you are as a filmmaker?
So many. I mean, any great film, there's an enormous number. But for me, it started back in the silent era. There was a book written by a great film scholar and critic called Kevin Brownlow. He wrote it in the late 60s. And when I first started to try to figure out how to make movies, that book had a big influence on me. And he had this notion that the language of cinema, this relatively new language that is global, that little kids can read before they can read in their own language, was basically defined by the silent era. The book was called The Parade's Gone By. And he was basically saying the parade's gone by, silent cinema defined the language. I've read one account where people said when people sat in the cinema for the first time and saw a big close-up of a head turning, they screamed because they thought it was a big, giant, disembodied head. When they saw a train go by, they sort of raced to see where it went. Mm-hmm. So all of the language that we pick up in the cinema has to be learned. The language is defined. And it was particularly defined by the action sequences. So you had directors, and Buster Keaton was a director, not only appeared in the movies. You had them doing stuff where one shot there was a causal connection between one shot and the next, putting together these little pieces of time connected like a musical sequence to make a coherent story. And classically in movies like all the great comedy moments, but classically the movie about the train, The General, set in the Civil War, Harold Lloyd with all those wonderful action sequences, to a big extent Charlie Chaplin, and all the way through their westerns and their that's when it happened. As we know, when sound came along, the equipment was so cumbersome, it really slowed everything down. That cameras had to be put in big, almost like big phone boxes, just for the sound, and they couldn't move. And as we know, Babylon. I don't know if you ever saw Babylon. And
Absolutely.
there's a sequence where the sound guy ruled the set until it told the camera where to go, told the actors how to speak, and so on. And then after a few months, everyone got fed up with it. And in time, the cameras have become more agile, and we can do that now. So, so those early movies, the Buster Keatons had a big influence, particularly on the first Mad Max, because they were basically driven by pure film language, in the main. As Hitchcock said, he wanted to make films where they didn't have to read the subtitles in Japan, that they play or almost as purely as visual, but almost like silent movies. So they had a big influence on me. And then, of course, there's so many filmmakers now. I mean, that's the joy of it. The people who just, inspire you. I mean, again, on first Mad Max, when I first saw Duel with Steven Spielberg, I think he made it when he was 21 or something. Yeah. And I thought, again, in that same way, that had a huge influence. And I even in the first Mad Max, I had a direct visual quote from Duel in the first Mad Max. And then you get, film. And I also like the way that film cultures play off each other. I know that Kurosawa, when he saw the American Westerns, he reinterpreted them as samurai movies, and hence you had Seven Samurai and Yojimbo and whatever. And then it went back the other way, where movies like Yojimbo were done as spaghetti westerns by Sergio Leone, and Seven Samurai became the Magnificent Seven. I love that that exchange of cultures, and you have so clearly, every filmmaker is influenced by those, and in more recent times, there's just so many of them. I couldn't. I mean, the list goes on and on, all for different reasons, and that's so interesting. And sometimes it's just individual films, where someone does a film and you think, wow, that just is completely fresh and interesting, and it really immersed me, and and just made me, these are films I'll never forget. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, your films influence us, and thank you so much for your time, sir. It's really been such an honor to get to chat with you, and we're so excited for Furiosa and IMAX.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you.